Hello, everyone. My name is Bruce Gersh, and I would like to welcome everybody to the business of entertainment. I'd like to start off by introducing our esteemed panelists. The first person is Louis Santor, an accounting major from 1989. Louis is the Chief Operating Officer of Village Roadshow Entertainment, which has produced over 85 films since its establishment. In 1986, including Joker, the Matrix series, the Sherlock Holmes series, the Ocean series, the Lego Movie. The films in the Village Roadshow library have achieved 24 #1 US box office openings and received 37 Academy Award nominations, 17 Academy Award, and 4 Golden Globe Awards. Louis, welcome.
Thank you, glad to be here. Thanks, Bruce.
My pleasure. The next panelist is Wendy Noller, radio and TV production, 1987, graduate of CSUN, created a highly successful career in post-production. Wendy made her producing mark on long-running television shows, including Star Trek, The Next Generation, and Friends, for which she earned an Emmy for Best Comedy Series. Together, Wendy and David run Knollwood Productions. Welcome, Wendy.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And finally, David Noller, theater major, 1986, a prolific producer, director, and writer of television shows, including Carnival, Power, and Big Love, Freaks and Geeks, and Lovecraft Country on HBO. Welcome, David. All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm really—
Hello. Now I'm unmuted.
Oh, now you're unmuted? Okay, perfect. Well, welcome everybody. I'm really excited to spend time with you over the next hour. And I just wanted to kind of jump into our first question, and I guess we could raise our hands, or I can call on people. Why don't I just call on you to start? But this is one that I'm hoping that all three of you really kind of discuss with our audience. So CSUN was ranked #6 among the most transformative universities in the country by Money Magazine for its transformative effect on our students, their families, and the region. I'd love for you to tell me your CSUN story. Why don't we start with Wendy?
My CSUN story. Wow. To make it brief, I originally thought I was going to be a journalism major, and I really wanted to be in broadcast journalism. And when I found out that I had to take newspaper classes and write, which was not a strength of mine, the dean told me to promptly look someplace else. So I moved towards radio, TV, film, and I was a radio television major. I worked at the radio station for a bout of time, and also focused on television production. But the thing that I really got from staying and being at Cal State Northridge was the opportunity to be in Los Angeles, where the industry was. And I knew I wanted to be in the industry, but I didn't know exactly where I wanted to be. One of my professors at the time, who had just come on to the production side at the school, was Kearns. And she had really told me that, to look at internships, try everything, and see what sticks, see what you like. And so I basically interned from the time I was a sophomore every semester. I went to school, I held a part-time job, and I held an internship that I'd go to 3 times a week, 2 to 3 times a week. And so essentially, I really got that from CSUN, was really the opportunity to try everything. And eventually, one of the internships I got turned into a job upon graduation. So it was a great way to start.
Wow, amazing story. And Louis?
Yeah, so growing up in the kind of greater LA area, and being actually the first of my family to attend college and graduate. At the time, coming out of high school, CSUN was frankly nearby and easy. But also, I knew I wanted to be in business. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I did know that CSUN had a reputation for having a good business school. And so it was an easy decision for me, taking on a new experience to attend CSUN. And I think for me, again, I didn't know what business meant at the time, honestly. And so getting into some of those early classes, and I think what impressed upon me and actually had me thinking about it initially an accounting major was that I had some professors early on in the early basic classes that were operators in the world of accounting and who brought a lot of kind of experience to light in the classroom, and that made me more interested in understanding how I could see that path towards a career utilizing accounting as the basis. So that was kind of my intro to that decision-making process.
Wow, thank you. And David?
I didn't go to Northridge. No, sorry. I was a theater major. I actually had gone in there wanting to be a theater and radio TV film major. But theater major was my major focus. I really was wanting to be an actor and director. Did that for I was working a little bit as an actor already, but started to really push towards directing. And at the same time, I was taking all these radio TV film courses because what I wanted to learn was over there. So I was trying to always balance between the two departments. And I probably would have graduated with both, I guess, until I got an internship again, not unlike Wendy, to work on a reality, what would now be a reality show, but we didn't call them then, but it was an outtakes bloopers kind of a show. Internship, logging in the basically in a closet, logging tapes and stuff. And I'm like, this is what I want to do, but I didn't care. And I made the best coffee there was and all that. And it eventually led to being offered a job, and I was still in school. So I was trying to find out how to do the job on the show and do this. The first thing I did was drop everything that was radio, TV, film, because there was no way I was going to be able to graduate with both. And then it took me 5 years because I took a job for a semester. And then I was able to graduate after that. But that was it was literally that internship that led to every single job I had to the point today. Some of my best friends and the people I work with were people that somehow were a degree or 2 degrees away from that internship.
Wow, that is an amazing story, and obviously the connection to the industry, the kind of the fascination with business. But maybe let's start with Louis, because Louis and I have a very similar starting path in the accounting field. Maybe Louis, can you tell us about your career path and then kind of what led you to where you are today?
Sure. Much like Wendy and David at CSUN, I also always had part-time jobs and on the edge of full-time at times as well. And I was fortunate enough to have a great job in a corporate environment as a financial analyst while I was attending school, and that gave me a lot of great perspective across the board as I was making the final decision to be an accounting major and how that applies to things. So understanding the path that the accounting school allowed at CSUN in terms of going to work for some of the large firms and getting the training and exposure to different businesses, I think was something that I felt very interested in as a way to not really have to make a decision yet in some sense. And I happened to have a lot of exposure to the accounting firms during my job that I had while attending CSUN. And that led to, the firms during recruiting events and otherwise me even having some interactions on the business front at the same time, which led to a relationship with a partner at a firm that was the head of the entertainment business. And so he I was in the apparel and shoe business at the time, and so he looked at me and said, you're in a business that will fit well in what I'm doing in the entertainment space as well, just based on, you know, the personalities and otherwise that are engaged in the business and what it takes, competitiveness and otherwise. And so I that's the reason I chose to go work at that firm, which is Coopers & Lybrand, now PricewaterhouseCoopers, and just, you know, got thrown into all kinds of clients in the entertainment industry and related and advertising and such, and learned the business, you know, from special effects companies to studio facilities to small producers, and just kind of learned the business from the ground up, and then did some consulting work for one of my for a client as they were building a new business plan and model, which at the time was New Regency Productions, which still exists today. And I ended up joining them after doing this very large long-term kind of business model plan for them, and ended up being there for 19 years and growing all the way up the ranks, starting as a manager of finance and all the way up to CFO and then COO at one point before departing there. So just have always been around the smaller but large independent businesses over the years, and gotten a lot of hands-on exposure through that process. And again, both CSUN and then the initial years of Coopers & Lybrand, getting the broad exposure to a client base just allowed me to take everything I learned and apply it to the next step and keep moving on.
That is what a great story. I always say that a business degree provides such a great foundation, and then accounting even, you know, kind of another layer to that foundation. But kind of the takeaway for me is, I mean, you never know where you're gonna go. You know, you have to start the path, but it leads you in many directions. And David, you know, your path has been really interesting, and obviously, you know, both you and Wendy being on the creative side. I'd love to hear kind of your story of how you started and kind of the path of your career.
Well, ironically, I went to Northridge. It was focused on, you know, like I said, directing and acting, that creative side. But the first group of jobs I had, I really wish I'd gone to business school, because I ended up really focusing on what would fall under accounting. I mean, I was budgeting, I was overseeing payroll, I was, as a producer, as what I, at that time was an associate producer and coordinator, I was pretty much organizing and making sure things were balancing out. And I slowly kind of got into the business more from a physical production standpoint and doing all the creative on the side in the background, hoping that one day the two would meet. So I would say the way in for me was whatever it took. So that's, it's great that it finally got back to what I wanted to do, but it was a great way in. I actually had seen someone's had a quick question, and I know that's not my place to look at the questions, and that's what you, Bruce. But one of the things they said is there any bad internship, or is it just about getting in the door? And my whole thing is, it's about getting in the door. That's it. You just want to work your ass off, be the best guy that makes coffee, the fastest runner to go pick up stuff, and you just want to not question. It's the old, don't ask me, you know, if you ask you to jump, don't ask me how, you know what I'm saying. I don't even remember the old saying, but just do it better than anyone else. So that was my circuitous route back to what then became directing and writing and stuff like that, which I'm doing now. But it was a backdoor entrance.
Well, point taken. Obviously, we hear it all the time, but you have to practice what you preach. And I agree with you. It's like, you know, kind of that entry point. You have to work very hard. You have to be willing to kind of do any type of job that will hopefully lead to, you know, great work that you've done. And Wendy, how about you? What was your starting point to kind of take you through your path?
Right. Well, my path began, as I said, from an internship. I started working for a production company that was doing small independent productions. And, you know, when I was doing the internship, I was collating scripts and just being around, reading scripts, doing anything I could. And that summer, or that that spring, they had an opportunity to take over the second season of Pee-wee's Playhouse. And so they offered me a receptionist office PA job. Did I want to be a receptionist? Absolutely not. But I would take any job it was to be in television. And so that's what I did. And when the director wanted curly fries, I went there and I made the best curly fries you could possibly make. I mean, you know, it's exactly like what David's saying. It's like you continue and do whatever it is to the best of your ability. But I started that way. And then I was very bad in math, which was why I was not a business major, even though, of course, I had to do budgets as my career went on. So I had to finish one class at Northridge. I could not pass that math exam, and I finally passed it and had to take a night class at Northridge. So I was offered a job on Pee-wee's Playhouse to stay on, but couldn't do it because I couldn't be there all the time with my schedule. And so I took a job as a page at Paramount Pictures. So I went that route. And it's almost like David in a sense where people I met, so someone I met on Pee-wee's Playhouse recommended me for a job when the writer's strike happened in the late 80s. And that's how I met Kevin Bright. And I started working for Kevin Bright as his assistant and then as a production coordinator, and was doing the independent shows he was doing for HBO. And then he was starting to work on In Living Color, and he was developing a show called Dream On. But in between that, I wound up leaving because those were taking quite a while, and got a job offer to go work on Star Trek: The Next Generation. And my career kind of just went from there. So I was on Star Trek: The Next Generation for 7 years, worked up from a post-production secretary to a post-production coordinator, because I fought to get the name of the job changed because it was doing the same job as the production coordinator, just on the post side. And essentially got into the union at Paramount Pictures, and then moved my way up to a production supervisor, post supervisor on there. And wound up, when that show finished, I decided not to continue on with the next series and moved over to this pilot called Friends, and I took a chance.
Yeah.
And then,
well, that was a good chance to take.
Good chance, yeah. But it was also with someone I loved and knew, which was Kevin Bright. He was producing it. And, you know, so I just thought, you know, laughing every day of my life could not be a bad thing. So.
Wow, what a special, what a great journey. For everyone out in the audience, we're going to launch a poll right now. So if you could bring the poll up and then maybe take a moment to answer the poll, that would be really helpful. So as you're doing that, I'd love to kind of go back to Louis. And, you know, we're obviously, this is a really interesting time for all of us. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There's lots of challenges across many industries. But like, how has the pandemic changed or affected your day-to-day job, your company? And then how is it more, you know, even on a broader scale, how's it changed? How do you think it's changed the industry?
Sure, it's a daily conversation, that's for sure. We were in the middle of production on Matrix 4 with Warner Brothers, and so that was shut down for a period of time in Germany. They had shot in San Francisco before going to Germany and got through that, and we're just about to start shooting, and it got shut down. So that was one aspect of things. I didn't personally have to get too involved in that because Warner Brothers is running that production themselves, but it obviously had an impact on us tracking the show from an insurability perspective as the world kind of changed in front of us. And, you know, we got back on track after being shut down for quite some time, and are now, I think, days away from, you know, finishing second unit work and being completely done. So, you know, right ahead of the potential shutdowns going on again. In the meantime, as an independent company that, you know, requires project financing, insurance has become a real, factor for us to be thoughtful of, and the difficulty of even obtaining, because as new insurance policies are coming on board, COVID exclusions and other pandemic exclusions are coming online. And if you need bank financing to have a show actually start production, you either need to put up more equity or significant guarantees, or somehow pay the price for an insurance premium, which is significantly higher than it used to be, for purposes of moving forward. And then on top of that, budgets are being impacted by the requirements for PPE and protocols that are in place, and change in personnel. Obviously, the industry went through a process where the guilds were negotiating how people were going to get back to work and when. And so those are aspects to the business that we're all now dealing with, for the first times on shoots. And then, thinking about the industry overall, obviously movie theaters are closed, and people, studios pushing out release dates, the streaming platforms, utilizing, their start, Disney Plus, for example, with Mulan, so we're seeing things in the industry for the first time ever that are changing the economics, and will have us starting to think about, when we make decisions on greenlighting a movie that we're risking a significant amount of capital in, or a TV show or otherwise, what was the game plan then may be very different now as we look at it going forward, around the economics just being turned on their heads, for us to think about the risk we're taking and the opportunity that's ahead of us. So it's significantly impacting almost every aspect of the business.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Wendy, the post-production business, in, I guess, even back 1 year, we would talk about these gigantic post facilities, and now post-production is virtual, not in every case, but I know in lots of instances. How has it changed kind of the world you're in, and then on the second level, you're operating and running a company as well that is dealing in this space. So how has that been affected?
Right. Well, I can't speak firsthand to that because I'm currently not working on a show. So I can't speak to what it is. I can only go off of what some of my friends and colleagues have been going through. And I know most people are working from home. A lot of my friends have editing systems set up at their house. Post-producers are working from home. I'm sure people are still going. There's probably some mixing, in-person mixing possibly, but I'm sure a lot of it is done via Zoom as well. I know in the past, before COVID happened, sometimes people would be shooting in New York and the mixing people would be in Los Angeles, and they'd have virtual mixing sessions as well. Not easy, not the best way to do it, but it's, you adapt. And so I think basically, and especially in terms of post-production, adapting is what you have to be willing to do, because the fact is things change constantly. Technology changes constantly. And so you have to be willing to learn the different ways of delivery, different ways of even production had to change when things went digital and weren't on film anymore. So I think, it's a challenge, I'm sure, but they're doing the best they can with what they've got. And then in terms of a production company, I mostly support David on that. I do a lot of the weirdest things. Like I was never a business major, but I'm handling the business of our company. So I do the accounting, I work with the accountants, I work with the lawyers, I do all that stuff. So, in terms of back and forth, sometimes David will ask my opinion on projects that he's working on, or we'll discuss certain things, but most of that goes directly through him.
And David, how has your day-to-day changed? Obviously, writers' rooms, meetings, a lot of that kind of social interaction around production in a show has gone away for a while and is now coming back. Can you give us some insight into how that process was through the pandemic and how it's changing?
I have to think that mine's a little different, but maybe not. I was after ending shooting the pilot on Lovecraft, I was pretty much went straight into development, and I was already kind of started writing and pitching shows. So by the time everything was shutting down for COVID, I was already in this kind of development mode. So it didn't affect me because I wasn't on a show that shut down. Okay. If anything, it freed me up. So in that sense, I feel like it was a blessing for me. We were lucky enough that I didn't have to be on a show at the time. And so with that happening, there's just been the focus strictly on development and pitching, and that's been happening on Zoom. So for me, it's been really successful. And if anything, I could say I like pitching on Zoom better because I'm a little bit more, I'm freer to be me in a weird way. It's like I'm not feeling like I'm on stage right away when you're having to go and like stand up and pitch shows in front of a whole group of people. And I could be in my pajamas and pitch a show and more comfortable. So that's kind of how that shifted. No one's going back to their offices. I mean, I know Warner Brothers has now pushed it later till they're going in. All the execs I'm dealing with over there, everything's from their home. There's a lot of changes in the business at a lot of the major streamers, Netflix, Warner Brothers, HBO Max, but everyone is doing it pretty much from their home. And in the meantime, I think some of these places, they're moving offices, they're building new offices. I know people from HBO are merging with HBO Max, but no one's actually gone into those buildings. So there's a big transition happening right now during COVID, and we'll have to see how it all really turns out. There's a few shows that have started, and it's mostly sitcoms, but there's a few single camera, but they're all going through the testing process, and it's tough. And all it takes is one person to be, get a positive, and now you've got every single person that's around them has to quarantine for 14 days. So if it's one Teamster and he went and had, is smoking with the other Teamsters, off on the side, now all your Teamsters are off and not working, and you're shutting down a show. And that's what Louis was talking about. The insurance is incredible. That's what's being prohibitive. And Louis could probably speak to it more in terms of shows going back, starting up again. So it's going to wait.
And do you think that getting a little deeper on just kind of the writing side, more comedy than probably dramas, where there's traditional writer rooms and this camaraderie around being together, now that everybody's on Zoom, do you think that there's kind of going to be a new normal?
Yeah, I think it will be a new normal. There's no question. I mean, I'm working, ironically, writers I'm working with right now, one's actually on a TV show as an actress, and she's on location, who co-wrote this show along with this other writer who's in London. So we're all on Zoom anyway. So that's that, right? For purpose of our work, that's happening that way. Yes, writer's room, definitely, but even show nights on sitcoms, they're feeding it into Zoom. The writers aren't normally on set for, show night. Now they're watching it from their computers at home. So it's not the same, especially for comedy.
Yeah, it's very different.
Very different. And it's really kind of moved towards even multi-camera shows being shot like single camera shows.
There's also, I think, a move to a lot of, more game show reality type unscripted, which is just easier to shoot, a lot fewer people on any set environment. It's an isolated set circumstance. You're not going on locations. So the programming, I think, will probably be significantly different for a while from an original perspective, until more of the broad, spectrum of shows can be produced without the risks of, the shutdown, which, in a scripted show costs hundreds of thousands a day to shut down if somebody gets sick, and you have to, and if you're not insured, it starts to add up very quickly.
Well, and the other point that you raised earlier, I think it was Wendy, there's new jobs that are being developed as well. So as, students that are listening or alum that are trying to get into the industry, there's typically a path of, I have to be a PA, but now there's new jobs. Do you want to maybe just highlight a few of those?
Well, I mean, the traditional, yes, the traditional path in production would be a PA. And so like traditionally, if you were going to be a post PA, you would just become a post PA from coming out of college. Usually they want someone that has a little more experience, that understands the dialogue to communicate. And then maybe you get bumped up to a post PA, or then to a set PA where you're working with the assistant directors and such. But now there's a whole new section that is, there's COVID supervisors, there's medical teams, there's COVID PAs. I think there has to be one COVID PA to every, 20 people at the most or something like that. It's crazy. I mean, that's the largest group it can be, but it's like, if you have a crew of 200 people, imagine how many extra people you have to bring on, along with the medical staff that's screening everybody. And then all of these COVID people, the support staff, they're having to make sure that their people are okay and covered. And, there's a lot of, and I'm sure there's other jobs outside of physical production. I mean, I know David, one of his friends at HBO, is dealing, you could speak to that better, David, about some of the stuff that Jay's doing, which is a whole new section too.
I mean, he's just organizing, started off really just focused on HBO, and it's really a lot of work all now with Warner Media on how they're going to approach everything. So there's, the larger the corporation, the bigger the protocols and the more intense the protocols and the more risk they're at. So the shows that have got up to go, or that are going, are kind of like their own separate shows, smaller studios, smaller companies that aren't putting someone else at risk. I mean, we can speak, Wendy and I can speak to why we know a little bit about the COVID thing right now, is because hopefully he doesn't get upset that we're even talking about him. But our son, who just graduated from Michigan,
December of 19.
Yeah, just graduated from Michigan, wants to be a deep cinematographer. He's been doing a lot of that work, but he just wanted to get on a show no matter what. So what he was able to do is find a COVID supervising PA position on Ozark. So he drove himself down to Atlanta because that's where they're shooting more. And he got himself on there. And luckily, he was able to move from just general to working at least with the camera department. But it's not what he wanted to do, but it's his way in, and he's around them. And that's kind of how, that's that new door. So,
what a great story that'll be. I said, oh, what a great story that'll be in his future.
Right. Yeah. But everyone I know, a lot of people are just training in COVID who have no backgrounds in it. You can actually take, Johns Hopkins is offering courses, and they give you production protocol now for shows. And it's interesting that it actually is becoming an entry point.
Well, thank you. That was kind of a great recap of that question. And we're going to just launch the results to the poll, just so the panelists can get a sense of who's in the audience. And it's nice to see a nice blend of students and alum. And then as we look across kind of the two schools, a nice blend from both the Nazarian School and the Mike Curb College of Arts. So thank you all for being a part of this. I'm gonna jump into one of my favorite subjects, and I always smile when I talk about it, is a mentor. And I have really two mentors that have been by my side through every twist and turn of my career. And I'd love to kind of hear about your mentor path. And did you seek out a mentor in your early years? Like, how did it all come together? And how does that mentor play a role in your life today? And how did the mentor play a role kind of through your career journey? And why don't we start with you, Wendy?
Oh, mine's not going to be as interesting as I think some other people's. I really didn't have a mentor in college. I was very self-motivated, and my dad was an engineer. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I had nobody in the entertainment industry at all. I did some commercials as a child actor, so I got the bug, and also was doing some singing and vocal work at the same time professionally, but decided not to go that route. And I think it was just like there was no, I just knew I had to keep striving for my goal if I wanted to make it. And so once I got in, and here's the weirdest thing is I was just thinking about the question because I've been thinking about it a long time and I haven't been able to come up with that one person. And the strangest thing is it's probably David, because I met David
You're in
really.
trouble.
No, I'm just saying I met David when I was working at Kevin Bright Productions. David was one of his producers, and once he stopped working there and we started dating. And
We were not dating while we were working together. I want to make that clear.
Okay, but I think he really helped guide me in a lot of ways. And then certain times when I felt that I either deserved to be at that next position or how do I get to that next position, he was always there to help me find that clarity. So, but other than that, I mean, I've had other people in my life that were very important in my career, but David has been that constant. I mean, I've known him for 30 something years, so it's been a long time.
Oh, and you, David?
It's really weird, you know, so I've been thinking about this too. And also I had so much just remembering from Northridge and stuff. It's really weird. Let me say this. There's an influence that I feel like that drove me that wasn't so much a mentor, but worked kind of as one, even though they weren't around. My experience at Northridge in terms of the theater department and the people and the friends that I met there and the shows we would do created such a camaraderie and collegiate working together and teamwork that I know I have gone out of my way to try to recreate that on every single show I've worked on. And clearly, I don't think everyone has, because the feedback I ever got on shows was always like, wow, we really love waking up and coming to work in the morning. That's not that way all the time. And I think I learned most of that from that environment. If it was a mentor, I would say, ironically, those first couple of people I met after those first couple internships, one of them being Kevin Bright, and another gentleman, Carmi Zlotnick, who worked with Kevin Bright and I'd met on that show, kind of ended up being mentors. We ended up becoming mentors, colleagues. I worked for them, they worked with me. I mean, it's hard to kind of say because everything started to shift and change. I mean, especially now, I can tell you, all my assistants over the years are all in positions of hiring me now. So, you know, that stuff ebbs and flows. Mentors become students, students become mentors. It's very zen. But that's the best answer I could give you.
And Louis?
Yeah, I would say I had a couple of mentors that were really just, you know, kind of positive support systems. You know, much like Wendy said, you know, I didn't have people in my life that were really, you know, business people. So I was kind of going down a new path from what I experienced in my family. So, you know, as I got exposure to people and as I was a college student and doing work in a, you know, professional setting, I think just, you know, that level of support. I mean, there's one gentleman that was an early mentor while I was in college and, you know, knew I was looking to leave when graduating to get into, you know, that more proper, you know, I guess, formal accounting, you know, work after graduation, who just was a constant, you know, support system for me, someone who I could, you know, talk to about issues or circumstances that I was, you know, dealing with, or as new opportunities came up to talk about or otherwise. And just really a constant support system that was all the way up through his unfortunate, you know, passing about a year ago. As somebody that I, you know, met with on a regular basis throughout my career and as I grew through the process. And then on top of that, I guess I will say that, you know, in the accounting world and that formality of a big 8 firm at the time, now 4, you know, I think that partner that I mentioned earlier that really looked at me and said, "You come work for me. I got something here for you," and just kind of threw me into, you know, circumstances and just, you know, said, go do it. I think those kind of that attitude of roll up your sleeves and just you'll figure it out. You know, those probably early mentor processes that, you know, allowed me to, you know, take the leap when the opportunity came, and just, you know, my entire career has been about, you know, getting exposure to something new that as the industry was evolving and as the companies that I've worked for and with have evolved, and constantly just having that attitude that just was instilled in me from the start by those people.
Wow, that's great stories. I'm a big believer in finding that mentor that could really guide you. And, you know, sometimes it takes a little bit more work on your side early on in your career because you're the kind of the new kid coming in, but it pays dividends over your career. So I agree with everything you've said. So I'm going to start with Wendy on this one. Can you just tell us one of the biggest challenges you faced in building your career and how you overcame that challenge?
I think the biggest challenge, and it might not be the same challenge today, but one of my biggest challenges was being a woman in the industry and how I would have to fight for equal pay. And it was very upsetting at times because when I would go in and try to negotiate for a next season on a show, I would always get an off, and I had a lot of friends on other shows on the studio lot. And so a lot of us would talk. And so I would know maybe what they were getting, or they would know what I was getting, even, you know, and I would always find out that I would be offered less, as if my talents were less than someone else. And when I would ask the question of why, it would always be, well, you're married and your husband makes money too. So this person, or something like that. And I didn't accept that. I used to fight. And I fought for what I wanted. I loved where I worked, but I always thought that, you know, my talent was worth something and I should be paid commensurate for what my ability is. So I don't know, does that answer the question?
That definitely does. I mean, you know, I'm sure that it was and hopefully no longer exists in the industry. But those challenges were definitely obviously.
Yeah, it wasn't always there. I would say it was more in the earlier years that happened, and didn't happen as much later. But yeah.
And Louis?
Yeah, I guess, gosh, I don't know. I feel like I've constantly had one challenge after another in this business. And we talked about COVID earlier, and you know, as David and Wendy can both probably attest to, making content in this world, whether it's today or 10 years ago, it's always a challenge, always, you know, some new thing that's coming up, and you're bringing hundreds and hundreds of people together and you're trying to make it work from, you know, every perspective, whether it be, you know, the script, the budget, the capital needs, you know, the personalities, you know, everything, you know, about it. So I've been involved in, you know, on a project level. I'll use an example of a movie that I was involved in called Fury, which was, you know, at the time, probably the largest independently financed and made movie. And, you know, just juggling, you know, components of that as you're negotiating deals with stars and directors and studios and making it all align. It's part of the fun of it. It's also an extremely you know, challenging process, and you take it from the project level to, you know, a corporate level, and, you know, I've got all these opportunities, and how do I make sure I have the, you know, the capital to ensure that we're able to execute on them, you know, all at the same time, and you know, dealing with bank structures and trying to be creative. I mean, it's one of the things that's fun about this business, on the business side, is that I don't want to say there's no rules, because there's always rules. But, you know, you can be creative and facing challenges from every perspective, whether it's on a production, on a set one day where a director decides they want to do something that wasn't in the mix, you know, to, you know, how do I, you know, how do I make sure we can start on time, you know, from a financing perspective or otherwise. It's, I think just, I don't know. I mean, chalk it up to all of that over the years, and going through the ebbs and flows of the changes in the marketplace, and, you know, and dealing with circumstances where if you have a couple movies in a row that don't work, and looking at what that means to your business and how it might impact you, and waiting for the next one and hoping it's a roller coaster, but
Yeah,
but it's fun.
I mean, the lesson learned is you have to adapt. I mean, that's a big term that a lot of companies use these days, is they like employees, executives that could adapt to new circumstances. COVID has probably created the biggest. I'm sure, David, on your side, you probably have dealt with personalities across the board and challenges, whether it's with kind of the creative team, the executives that are, fighting hard for a change in a script, actors that don't like the lines. Like, how do you deal with it?
Boy, Wendy could probably answer that better than I can, because she's at the other end of my phone calls when I'm like in Chicago, pulling my hair out. Look, the hardest thing for the stuff that I've run through and dealing with, basically you deal with every department in my job, whether it's writers and directors and actors to department heads. It's trying to keep an open door as much as possible, and I really try to do that. But sometimes it just doesn't happen. And there's a lot of egos, and it's about checking in at the door. I am the first one to say there have been many times was not able to check my ego at the door, and I was like, wait a second, killing myself and watching someone else run and take the credit for it, and it kind of get me. And then finally, I had to get to that place where saying, I just got to focus in and do the job I need to do, and not let all that crazy stuff, because it's crazy making, get to me. And I would say that's the biggest challenge, because it's very easy to be working with people who their biggest goal sometimes is to make themselves feel better. And the only way they can do that is by making everyone around them feel less. It's just a common thing in all businesses. So I would say the biggest struggle I've had, and I'm still working to this day, are those things. But as I get older, I think the thing is just, stay in your lane, do your work. If you want to kind of reach out, I saw someone ask a question, how do you let people know what you've done? You don't be a noisy wheel all the time. You don't want to be that guy. You just kind of create an environment where it's trust and you're following through, and just stand in good character. And at the end of the day, if you can do that, I think all the other stuff does come, because eventually people will notice, no, he's a person of their word, or they're a person of their word, they'll follow through, and I want them on, even if it's a new position that they never thought of you for. It's the person, it's the character they want to bring on. So that's my best advice, is trying to not let the ego of everyone, including yourself, get in the way.
And maybe to add on to that, and we can possibly go back to Wendy and Louis, and then we'll jump to some of the questions that were submitted from the audience. But as you think about all these challenges, and then you take yourself back to college, and you think about the skills you developed at CSUN, what were those skills that kind of helped make you effective?
Is that me first?
We could go to you, Wendy.
Okay. Tenacity, patience, team player. Listen, I was going to add something on to what David had said about ego. And I think one of the most important things that you have to remember, especially if you're working in physical production or anything, even if you're not working in physical production, even business, the entertainment industry is a team, and you have to support each other. And you can't let your ego get in the way of what the final product is. And for instance, for me, I had to deliver a show every week to NBC because it had to air. And no matter what maybe I thought a way was better to do, it wasn't my choice to make that. There were people who created this show, and it was if we were on a mixing stage and maybe I liked a cue better, or I thought something should be done a different way, that's fine for me to have my opinion, but the final choice was the people who created that show, and for them to put their final stamp on what was going to be aired that next night. And so you just have to find your way to, even if you're someone who's creative and you may not be in that ultimate showrunner creative position, even though that's not something I ever aspired to, you still have to always find your way to support the people you work with the best you can, because you're trying to create, it's like I said, it's a team, you're trying to create their vision together. And everybody from the director of photography to the editor to the set decorators to the designers to the
Production accountant.
Everybody, you know, what?
Production accountant.
Production, the production, everybody, but everybody's trying to create something. And, you know, I remember there'd be times where, and this is where accounting comes in too, where budgeting comes in, where maybe our producers wanted a certain song or a certain cue in the show, and the artist would come back and say, well, the sync and master rights of that are going to be, you know, we want $50,000 for the sync and $100,000 for our master. And that wasn't anything that was in our budget. So it's like, then you're having to go back and forth with different departments. So production is now talking to the music department, and the music department's getting involved with it. And they may even have to go to someone else. And sometimes we even had to go to the actual record company to see if so we're negotiating with like multiple different areas. So everything has to work together. So you have to learn to be able to communicate with people. And I just think from my CSUN perspective, bringing it back, that, you know, working in the radio, TV, film department, when you're doing physical production, everything is team-based. And if you're not working together, if you're not communicating, you're not going to have anything that's remotely presentable.
Yeah, I think team is a big, big word that needs to be understood as kind of this process goes on. And Louis, do you have anything to add?
I'll just say, you know, from the accounting, you know, finance, business side of things, just the technical skill and ability to think analytically and relationally, you know, because what this really is, and it's funny, I think I said earlier to the panel before we started, you know, my son decided to be an accounting major like I was, and one of the things I asked when I asked why, and he says, I just enjoy the classes, like I'm trying to solve a puzzle constantly. And if there's anything we're trying to do in this business every day, it's solving puzzles. And all the interrelationships of these groups of people trying to come together from a, you know, finance, business, production, post-production, distribution, all the perspectives and what it takes for everybody to get together and accomplish, you know, the goal of delivering what, you know, the episode or the movie. It's all about team. It's all about understanding the relationship, context of things. You know, by the way, music is never correctly budgeted, right, Wendy and David? Nobody ever budgets music correctly. And we all know that, just from having the experience.
Everyone knows that.
That's right. So, you know, it's really about just it's solving a puzzle constantly. You know, how do we achieve this, and how many different ways can we? And that gets to, you know, right now looking at a budget and it's over budget. What scenes can we cut? How do you know, it's everything is a constant puzzle and relationship driven and opportunity driven across the board. And so those kind of skills that come through business and analytics and mindfulness in that regard, but then also the people behind it and what they need to achieve, and understanding that perspective is, I think, how my business background lends itself to this industry.
Yeah, it sounds like, you know, similar to me, the foundation that was set by my education at CSUN really helped propel me and prepare me. And it sounds like that was a very similar experience. And David, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, just to piggyback a little bit on what Louis was talking about, the higher up the chain you go in terms of the artists that you work with, the more difficult it becomes in terms of the team and a piece of art. And so, because you have to balance that, because if you're lucky enough to get someone who's a Academy Award feature director, which Louis and I have had this opportunity together to work with, but without going to, but there is someone who comes from, this is my vision. This is it. It's me or the highway. And that's very hard to kind of do, but there are ways around it. And the most important thing financially is to figure out how you get that to happen for them and still make it work. Because the easiest thing to do is to say, we can't afford it, we have to cut it. That's the easy thing, you know what I'm saying? And the hardest thing to do is say, okay, here's the answer on how about this, we can work with this, and this will give you creatively what you want to say, and then so we can kind of lose this and give you the other opportunity. So it's a lot of times just really trying to understand what's behind what the person's looking for to kind of get to your answer to solve the financial part. And that's the balancing act.
It sounds, we always hear that it's easy to say no. It's hard to solve a problem. So that's some great guidance. So I'm going to jump to some of the questions. I'll probably, based on the theme, I could maybe even use some components of questions that I still had, because it seems like we could talk for hours. But when we touched on it a little bit, but it seems to be a theme as I've read through a few of the questions, is like, what advice would you give a CSUN student today on how to enter the industry? And, you know, with the ever-changing delivery of content, you know, how does that kind of change the entry point? And I know we talked a little bit about the COVID piece of it, but are there any other guidance points you would give about kind of entering the industry?
Can I start with that?
Yeah, please.
One of the things that I would say is, especially, I don't know what it is like in the business department, so I can't speak to that, but I'm sure the film department has references. So I'm sure everything's online now. When I was in school, it was a book, a giant notebook. But it's imperative to do internships and meet people. It's imperative to find out what you don't like. You need to know what it is you don't want to do. And I used internships in that way. I interned at a radio station and I went, I don't want to be in radio, but that was a good experience. So it's at a production company, a physical production house. I mean, I did all different things until I could really find, and I didn't look at it like, I'm going to do this internship and this is going to ultimately be my job. I just wanted to get as much experience as I could in many different areas. And so what I would say is, really, if you're in school, definitely intern. And the thing I can also say is, especially on Friends, most of the people I hired as interns or even students, most of them in my department were CSUN alumni. I did have alumni from a few other schools, and it was few and far between, because I always felt like CSUN students were extremely hard workers. They got it. They did the work. They knew they had to work their way up, as everybody does in the industry. And they didn't come in thinking, well, I just graduated from CSUN and I was a cinematographer on X, Y, and Z films. So I want to be this next cinematographer on Friends. It's like they understood that, you know, everything takes work and everything takes time, and it will happen. And it will happen for everybody. It's just that your first job, your second job, and your third job will not be where you want to be. They'll just be stepping stones where you learn a lot about yourself, about others, and about really where you want your career to go. Because it could change. You may think it's one thing at one point, and then you go, God, I never even knew that there was, this location department, and I love to travel and I love to take pictures and I like to do that. That seems really interesting. I didn't know that was an opportunity, and now you learned about it. So you have to give yourself the opportunity to be open to what's out there.
And do you have any guidance? Because I'm sure all of us have many people that reach out for internships. What's the source? How do students, alumni even find those internships? Is it on job boards? Is it?
I think that, I only know from a lot of it can be on job boards. I've seen a lot of things even on job boards, recently, looking for interns, even entertainment internships, but I'm not 100% sure how it works today. But in post-production, like, we have a chat page on Facebook that's industry, for the industry people who are in post. And we all amongst the producers will share, you know, hey, I'm looking for this, or I'm looking for that. Do you have an editor? I'm looking for assistant editor. I'm looking for a post PA. And, you know, we share resumes. And that's one way to do it, just through the social media aspect of it.
Louis, any additional comments on how to get your foot in the door? And
yeah, I think, you know, what's interesting, obviously coming from, I think I saw one of the questions was, do I recommend, you know, a Big Four accounting firm, you know, as a start? And, you know, what's interesting is obviously on some level, differentiating yourself from the start at a young age is, you know, is important. And obviously the Big Four firms is where, you know, typically are recruiting, you know, the top of your class in terms of students or otherwise. And so it starts to become a little bit of a, you know, if you are there, then someone knows that you've had the work ethic to achieve the grades, to then achieve, you know, the circumstances and opportunity to work in that environment. You know, and then if you're going that route, it would be about making sure you're at a place that has a base of entertainment clients as that you have an opportunity to work on and work, you know, from that perspective to get exposure to the business. But I think David said it earlier, and it is interesting when you spend as much time as we all have in this business. I think I said in one of our panel conversations, like, production accountant. I mean, what you can learn through being a production accountant. And so if you start as a PA and you really want to get into this business, you know, I know production accountants that started in that way, that they're now heads of physical productions at studios. And that's a role that is if you want to talk about bridging the art and science of and business of making TV and film, you know, that's the position that it happens at, and someone that interacts on the creative and the business side constantly every day. And so I think it really is about, you know, so many different avenues to get to an end place. And opportunities, and when you can apply yourself and just, you know, work hard and get that PA position from the start, wherever it's at, you'll find what you're interested in to further Wendy's thoughts. And you know, this industry has so many things, you know, from hair and makeup to, I think somebody asked about being a dietitian. Well, of course there's dietitian roles in this industry, because you're dealing with, you know, actors and people who are in a work environment that isn't conducive to eating well. And so, you know, everybody's got to stay in shape and healthy. And as the world, you know, so it's such a microcosm of the world in this industry that every opportunity for you to do something exists. You just have to find your way into it and from every angle that you're coming from.
Yeah, and not where, you know, the entry point isn't always the final.
Never the end game. Exactly.
You really have to. And David, I'm going to jump to another question, because I know there's, you know, a lot of creative people that are in the audience as well. And this might be a little bit too inside baseball, but there was a question about, you know, how much as scripts are being developed, like how much description and dialogue really need to be incorporated into a script. So I don't know if there's any guidance you could give around just the creative process there.
Well, it depends on really what the bigger goal is. Is it a feature script? Is it a pilot script? Is it a spec script for an episodic show? So every show is going to have its own sample. If you're a beginning writer and you're going to do a spec script, which hasn't been actually sought out as much these days. It used to be when I was starting out, you do a spec script, which was a sample script of a show that exists, of what a typical episode would be. And you write it on your own for free, and that becomes a sample. Now people are doing a lot more original scripts that are kind of like pilots. There are some great books out there. There's standard Sid Field is a great book, Robert McKee. There's some standards of screenplay writing and script writing I suggest to go to. Will show you the balance of description and dialogue and how much you need to include. if it's a pilot, I personally like to have a lot more of the general description stuff not in the script. I like to kind of have a presentation about it and then let the script kind of speak for itself and just show exactly what the audience is seeing and not have to explain too much background within it. And there's something else to show because it's only taking up space. But it's so different for every type of show, whether it's a comedy or a drama, and the place it's going, whether it's an HBO or a broadcast network. So there's so many different answers on that. I highly recommend. There are so many great books that what I mentioned. There's some great writers boot camps. There's one called Writers Boot Camp actually that I've gone to that I think is really great. Just got to do a little research, but there's definitely sources on what goes into a script, if that's what the question was.
Well, that is incredible. And I'm sure, you know, that's only one side of the industry. Then, you know, they have pitches on the reality side that are completely different. So, so thanks for that. I'm going to jump back to some of my questions. I know we have a bunch of really good questions, but this will incorporate some of the stuff that I'm reading as well. And I'm going to start, go back to you, David. What do you suggest that our audience members do to set themselves apart from others to enter the entertainment industry? Like, are there any real specific ideas around how an individual can really set themselves apart?
Honestly, I'm going to be really blunt. These days goes back to working your ass off and having good character, because I have to tell you something. There is an entitlement thing that is coming in to people we interview. I won't go to, I'm not going to mention which universities, but there are definitely some particular ones where when you graduate there, there's a sense of, well, I'm going to start off as the king and that's just it. And there's nothing. And so they set themselves apart, those guys, they just don't work again. But they might get to what they're looking for, and that might be what they want. My philosophy has always been get in there and just work your ass off in whatever they give you. I mean, my dad used to tease me saying, hey, jack of all trades, master of none. And it was a negative thing because it was like, you better start being really good at one thing. Well, ironically, in the long run, I look back and go, that jack of all trades made me a really good producer because I really got to know every department. I had to budget and I really understood finances. I actually worked in the script department for a while. I mean, I've been an acting coach. I literally have my hands in so many different things that I can at least have a conversation and enough to acknowledge that I'm not the expert in it and I'm hiring the expert in it. So that with that comes also the respect of that person who's the king in their domain. So that's how I really think you set yourself apart, because if you're one of those people that go out there and your whole goal is to set yourself apart, you could end up being the kid that talks about themselves all the time and isn't doing the work. And I'm telling you, if you just kind of go and just do whatever is needed, they'll notice you. And that time will come up where someone will say, you know, you've been working your ass off here, 6 months down the line, come in, do you want to talk? What do you want to do? Because you've gotten to know someone. And those are your opportunities. At least that's what I tell my kid. We'll see if that works.
Thanks. So we only have a few minutes left, and I just have one final question for each of you. I'm going to start with you, Louis. Obviously, we hear it all the time that content is king. Your company has an incredible library, and that library is great intellectual property. Like, tell us about like the importance of IP in a library in kind of today's world.
No, absolutely. Look, the industry as a whole is spending more money on content today than ever before, with Netflix alone spending $15 billion a year on content. But with that, and with all the streaming platforms coming online and everybody moving in that direction, and all the great television on HBO and otherwise that David and Wendy have been involved in, you've got to find a way to differentiate yourself. And so having that baseline IP that you have the ability to kind of use as a leverage point starts to at least be something where someone can say, okay, I get it. I see where you're going with this. And we, we're owned by a company that owns libraries as well as the library that we've financed with Warner Brothers and Sony over the years. And we're using that IP as a basis for turning it into different projects. So if it was a film, we're taking a different approach to a television series for it. Using the basis of the world, not necessarily even the characters or otherwise. But if you can actually kind of lay a foundation that people can recognize and understand, it starts to provide you at least with a launching off point that you can gain some recognition from and interest in from the buyers of the world. So absolutely, very important from many perspectives.
And well, thank you, David. And I mean, Louis.
That's okay, but I will add.
David, you're done.
Because it is
Thank
about
you, David,
IP.
you're done. Actually, jumping to you, because this was actually a question that came up. You're obviously a producer and writer and director and actor. Like, how do you balance all those? Do you plan on directing more, acting again?
Okay, the acting thing was a long time ago, and no. The answer on that one is no. I'm always afraid something's going to come up and haunt me. The directing, absolutely. I still direct, and I still, I actually am really interested in stepping back into theater, as someone asked that, and directing in theater too. But no, I definitely have not gotten rid of. The problem with directing and producing at the same time is it's hard to kind of keep your hand on the wheel as a producer and go off and direct. So you have to make sure you have someone who actually can take the wheel for you. I was really blessed on a lot of shows where I directed that I had a producer that could come up and take on a lot of the stuff so I could be focused on the episode. So the balance came from timing. Like I would never take an episode to direct early in a season. I'd wait till like towards the end, or if it was the very first episode up of a season, so I could get back to the producing part. So those are the juggling things. The writing is really a separate thing that I'm now doing when I have the time. There is no time to write when I'm producing. There just isn't. I'm just in the show. So that's why I'm so grateful for this last year, pretty much. So for me personally, this COVID's been awesome, but I know I'm a rarity, and I'm not looking a gift horse in the mouth that I've been blessed to have that. So that's my balance in acting.
Well, thanks, David. I won't call you Louis. And then Wendy, you won an Emmy in 2002. One of my favorite shows. Just tell us a little bit about that experience and kind of that highlight point in your life.
Well, first of all, I feel really lucky to have been a part of that show. We had two amazing creators, Marta Kaufman and David Crane, along with their producing partner, Kevin Bright. They were brilliant, and they created this amazing place to work. And we, the whole crew, cast and crew, we put everything into every episode. And I got to work for 10 years at a place where I laughed every day, which was hopefully going to add some years to my life, which is great. And I also had my own crew, was incredible. And before I get into the Emmy part, I was very lucky because we did, Bright Kaufman Crane did multiple shows. So at one point in my journey with them, I was overseeing 2 shows at the same time. So I was overseeing post for Veronica's Closet and for Friends. And so we were doing both those shows with 2 crews underneath me in that department. But in terms of Friends, we got nominated a lot. I think it was 6 times. And we lost 5 of those times. I can't remember exactly how many times, but I think it was 6. The interesting thing is in the early years when we'd be at the Emmy Awards, they'd go, and the Emmy goes to, and you hear Fur, and you think it was Friends, and it's Frasier. And then you go up in your seat, and then you go down in your seat. And, so it was kind of one of those weird things. But the year we won was just incredible. It was an incredible season. It was the season where Rachel had her baby. And the work was just great that year. And we were just really excited to be acknowledged. I was really proud to be part of that team, that I could be part of the producing team. And it was really great. I mean, it's wonderful to win an Emmy, as you know, because you two have one. And it's a great thing for someone to give you. But of course, that doesn't define who I am. I'm glad it defines for a period of time and work that I've done. So that's what's great. But I don't think you can let those things be your ultimate goal, because there's always going to be something after that. And so I think you have to enjoy the journey there. And if it happens, that's a wonderful thing. And if it doesn't happen, you still have to enjoy the journey of any production or any project that you're on, because they're always going to, whether you get an award or not, they're always going to give you value in some way. And you'll learn from each one of them. I've been on shows that I absolutely hated being on, pilots that I hated and couldn't wait till I was off of them. But, you learn things from that too.
Well, that's great guidance. And it does come back to celebrating with your team. Once again, that was my moment as well, where I got to celebrate with my team. Well, as I said, I could talk to the three of you for another 2 hours, but unfortunately our time is up. And I want to thank each of you for your wisdom and your honesty and your support of the students and the school. And we're just really grateful that we had kind of this moment with you tonight. And so for everybody in the audience, this event was recorded and will be emailed out to everyone. And then if I can just get each of the panelists to just hold up their, and Jordan, someone's gonna take a picture and I'll count to 3. Louis, a little higher. There we go. Okay.
Well, actually, it's funny. Mine isn't being. There we go.
There you go. Okay. 1, 2, 3. All righty. Well, thank you very much, and enjoy your evening, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.